Welcome back to the Imaginary Gallery. It's TJ, your host, and tonight is a viewer's request. The viewer will remain nameless, anonymous, for your protection. But the first initial request was, can you please do more on cognitive dissonance, which I know that subjects come up a lot here and there, usually intertwined with other subjects, so I figured that's kind of broad and general, so I asked for more detail. Like, what situation are you looking for it within? So I got my answer. So before going into the answer, for those of you who do not know the term cognitive dissonance, I'll give a brief definition. If you're dealing with cluster B, sociopath, psychopath, whatever types, cognitive dissonance is something you will more than likely experience. And what it is in order for us to be like a happy person who's comfortable, the things around us need to make sense. Well, cognitive dissonance occurs, and I took an actual definition off the web rather than just going off my knowledge. Cognitive dissonance is a mental stress or discomfort of which occurs when you try to hold two different beliefs, ideas, or values which are contradictory at the same time. Or when you perform an action that contradicts beliefs, ideas, or values that you have. And the third would be when you're confronted with new information of which conflicts with your current beliefs, ideas, or values. And with the cluster Bs, the typical circumstance would be the person has told you that they're, let's just say to be simple, nice, but then you uncover 20 things they've done that seem pretty evil. Well, your brain cannot reconcile the two thoughts of this person's really nice and this person's really evil. They can't exist together and give you any kind of harmonious existence. Well, we will move on to the question. Yes, can you please do one on cognitive dissonance in relation to people claiming to have attention deficit disorder and the ways they can appear to be ignoring you, being bossy, interrupting, and of course constantly focusing on themselves, but then when you address it, they say you are not being understanding of the fact that they can't help it because they have ADD. Yet it seems they have no trouble staying focused on themselves. That's the first part of the question. So, before answering, I can attest that I've been guilty of ADD or ADHD traits at times, and when I read that question, I kind of see a difference though. For example, if I'm talking to you right now and I've got these great ideas I really want to tell you, and if you interrupt when I'm not finished with one particular one, I may feel like I really want to get this information out, and if you interrupt and say something, I might be thrown off, which has been known to happen, where I've got this brilliant idea to share and I'm starting to do it, and then the other person says, oh, by the way, and then jumps in, it can cause the thought in my brain to be gone. So rather than say, stop and listen to me, I've learned ways to manage such things, such as take out a little pen and just write a note, take out the phone, write a note so I don't forget, just use a keyword. That was just, I thought it was interesting how this question mentions evidently ways that other people deal with such things. First, we have to assess that you're dealing with a person who is claiming to have the ADD. I have noticed on actually a few occasions, many of these individuals they know there's something wrong with them. They know that if they're trying to intermingle with regular folk, that sometimes they can be detected. So I think a lot of them actually mimic or just use a mental illness as, I see it, as an excuse or as an insurance policy. Because it's kind of strange, because usually if someone does have some kind of mental disorder, it's very rare you'd think that, hi, nice to meet you, by the way, I have this mental disorder. It's just not usually a flattering thing. So I'd be suspicious of anybody who says that kind of thing to you, because it's almost like they're wearing it like a badge of honor, or they're stating it like it's some kind of special permission slip, especially with the cluster Bs. One common one I've heard from a few is, oh, I'm bipolar. And thanks, really? So what? But I think they use it because they know that when they're not that great of a regular human being impersonator, that their partner or whoever they're with is likely to pick up on a few things or notice some inconsistencies. So they feel if they state, oh, well, I have this mental disorder, then that means that whatever doesn't make sense, they can just blame it on that. And it just seems kind of fishy, kind of phony. In relation to the viewer question, she's talking about how they can ignore you, or being bossy, or interrupting you, and bringing the conversation back to themselves. And I believe where she brings the cognitive dissonance into it is when you address the situation, which I would imagine she's saying when the person's saying, I've got this disease, how dare you not be sensitive to it? How could you, whatever, when she'd say something like, hey, you say that you've got ADD, but you sure talked for an hour about that thing you did at one time, which to a regular person is likely to create cognitive dissonance, because you're hearing a person say to you they have this mental illness, and yet you're interacting with them, and then you notice the behaviors they will do, which in this case would be ignoring you when you're saying something important, bossing you around, or interrupting. And if you say, hey, I wasn't done talking, what I'm getting is they'll be like, how dare you get after me for doing whatever I did? I have ADD. It's almost like, in this example, it sounds like the person is using it as the get out of trouble free card, which sounds like an abuse of a mental disorder. Sounds like someone using it as an excuse for their poor behaviors, especially if you can witness them going on for an hour about the trip they did in Mexico or whatever. And yes, it can cause the cognitive dissonance, because it will seem like when you're discussing your concerns, they're just not important because the other person wants to tell you their story. And your brain is thinking again that I wasn't done with my story, and then they're like, well, I have ADD, how dare you? And it probably creates a mental confusion because when it happens to be a subject about the other person, they can fluently discuss it for hours. But when you're talking about your situation, it's interrupted, it's pushed away, or it's subject being changed to the other person. Well, I still agree that it sounds like the person is using the condition as an excuse for being rude. And if you were to say, but wait a second, you had talked about that for an hour, you'd probably get some other kind of BS response. When I reread the question a few times, it kind of sounds to me like people who are behaving in this manner and blaming it on disease sounds to me like just another form of abuse. And it also ties in the narcissist slash cluster B loved trait of pity, pulling the pity in. So someone like this, we're being described, is being confronted about their inappropriate behavior, and rather than agreeing and making some kind of plan to work on adjusting such reactions in the future, instead it's just saying, oh, well, I have this disease, you're so insensitive. That's pity play. That's pity ploy. Making it out as if you are somehow abusing them, which is another form of projection as well, because chances are you're bringing up a valid concern, which in any other circumstance with any other regular person would be addressed in a nice, rational manner, but in this case it sounds like the person is falling back on this label they've given themselves, as if that means that they're free to do or say whatever they want, and you better not dare question it or criticize it. And if you do point out the obvious emperor's new clothes type thing, they'll be the first one to say, how dare you have no respect for the mentally ill. I have this disorder, and it's abuse. That is abuse, because if you compare that interaction to others you've had about other circumstances that do not have anything to do with the abuser, but maybe have to do with an external source, and you're being mistreated and you share that with your ADD person, you'll notice in those circumstances he or she will be like right there to help you and understand exactly where you're coming from. But when you're dealing with him or herself involving inappropriate behaviors, it's a whole different story. And you'll find they do not even give your concerns even a tiny bit of consideration. It's just, how dare you interfere in this, or how dare you say that when I told you I have this. And it's probably very frustrating. Now, there is a second part to the question, which states, also, this may not tie in, but cognitive dissonance, as it relates to seeing a person behaving in a self-sabotaging and other sabotaging manner, yet having compassion because you know their story and what caused them to be this way, and asking yourself the question of, are they a toxic person or just a person with more issues than those we've ever been around before? Well, this kind of question, when I read it, if I'm using proper intuition, it sounds like the viewer is concerned about another person who is acting in self-destructive ways and maybe doing so because of some, let's say, a poor upbringing, a terrible upbringing, or perhaps a mental disorder, or all of it. She's asking, is this person toxic or just somebody with more issues? I can't help but when I read this question think that it kind of ties into the other discussion where when it says here, you know the story and what caused them to be this way, I'm not necessarily 1,000% convinced that their circumstance would make them be self-sabotaging. Because yes, many of us go through circumstances at young ages which may affect us later, but when we become adults, many of us will have the option to assess our choices and our behaviors and decide if they're productive or not. And there are some people who do not reach that point and instead choose to just tell others, well, the reason I act this way is because of, and they give, I have a mental disorder, or because I was beaten as a child, or because my parents left me, or any number. But you have to watch out for the external locus of control with these people, because many times, if you're dealing with a toxic person, they may be in a bad situation, at least in parts of their lives, and you've got to listen carefully to the reasoning behind it, because if you hear stories like, oh, well, it's only because of the circumstance I was in, that's why this is, that's a sign the person does not take accountability or responsibility for their situation. Because sure, if they were a deprived child and whatever happened then, well, those days are over. If they're an adult now and they're still behaving in horrible ways and just saying, oh, well, that's because of the childhood, or that's because of the mental illness, or that's because of whatever, that is a symptom that the person is not taking any accountability for their position and is wanting, again, pity. They love to play a victim. So it sounds like in this question, the viewer is sensitive towards this person's story, probably, I'm guessing, and feels that she knows that certain things had happened and then watches this person do self-destructive things and then says to herself, well, he's doing those destructive things because of insert reason there. But as far as them being toxic, if they're doing toxic things to others, if they are using dishonesty and manipulation to get people to bend to their will, then yes, they're toxic. And as far as them just having more issues, that sounds like the viewer's a very sensitive person and looking for the good answer in the circumstance, but it sounds like, just from the words here, that it's probably a toxic person who has found the viewer to be one who's open to the possibility that things could be better or fixed, and if this hadn't happened, then things would be great, and I would look out. I would just be careful, because I know how it is to have that magnetic attraction towards such a person that has so many great things, but then so many horrible things. And that's creating cognitive dissonance as well, because you think this is the person of my dreams in these ways, but not in that way. And it can lead you down a road of turmoil mentally, because you think, well, if we could just fix this and this and this, then everything will be great, but it doesn't happen. I hope I answered the questions I kind of read some more into it, but I do welcome people's questions. And I'm not Miss Cleo, but have a great night.
I am the narcopath. My new name is Miss Cleo. I am the Miss Cleo resurrected, and I tell you now, the cops, they never lie. So, I lie, because they never lie.
Oh, darling, I know what you're thinking. You think that fortune-telling is all a bunch of hogwash. Well, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. After all, your car broke down right outside of my place. Do you think that was a coincidence? I don't think so. You were meant to come to me tonight. Now let me look at you. I'll prove to you how real I am. Well, I won't even ask you what kinds of questions you have. I will just tell you what I see. Now, let me concentrate on the crystal ball. I see a lover in your life. I see lots of lies. Did someone lie to you? I think someone did. Cheating. Did someone cheat on you? I knew it. See? I'm not asking for any money at this point, but I do see there is a curse on you. Do you notice how many people you date and have copulation with turn out to be evil and cheaters? Well, I assure you I knew it. I can see it. You've got a curse on you. Now, I know this consultation is free because I summoned you from the streets. I knew I could sense your distress. But you do have a curse on you, which means for the rest of your life, you will always have bad luck with your dates. However, I have got good news for you. There is a remedy. I do have an antidote to remove the curse from you. However, I must inform you, maybe I shouldn't say anything about it. Never mind. Well, if you insist. It costs $1,000, but I guarantee you it's worth every penny. How do you think I've been in business all these years? So, you gather up your $1,000, come on back here, and we'll work on removing this spell so you can have true love for eternity, and you don't have to deal with these loser, liar, cheaters anymore. Is it a deal? I guarantee it's worth it. I am Miss Cleo.